What's good, Raider Nation? Welcome back to Vegas Nation First and 10, your weekly go-to for Raider news and analysis. I'm Vinny Bonsignore. I cover the Raiders for the Las Vegas Review-Journal and Vegas Nation. To my right is Ed Graney, our great columnist at the Las Vegas Review-Journal and Vegas Nation. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get to it, and we got a lot to get to, I just want to say thank you to the Las Vegas Review-Journal and Station Casinos STN Sports. They bring you all of Vegas Nation podcasts, including First and 10, so thank you for your support. Well, let's get right to it. The Raiders had some major boxes to check off this offseason, and we'd be remiss not to put quarterback at the top of that list.
That's what everyone was waiting for the whole offseason.
Yeah, we've been talking about it all offseason. Who is it going to be? It certainly wasn't going to be a rerun of Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. That certainly didn't happen, but a little bit of a surprise, I would say. The Raiders, rather than waiting for free agency to open, decided to preemptively take care of the quarterback spot by trading for Geno Smith. Right. He reunites with Pete Carroll, who he played with in Seattle for 5 years. Or 4 years, 2 of those as a starter in Seattle, kind of revived his career under Pete Carroll. And when you look at everything, when you consider everything, I'm not so sure that if Geno Smith was a free agent that he wouldn't have been the top quarterback available. So probably a good move for the Raiders to neglect the Aaron Rodgerses and the Sam Darnolds and the Justin Fields and go right to it, go trade a third-round pick to go get your quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, huge upgrade. Mm-hmm. There's no question about that. Be interested to see what he does in Chip Kelly's offense.
Right.
And, you know, you've said before, and I think we might find out soon here, maybe as soon as tomorrow on Wednesday, is that what will the extension be? Mm-hmm. Because they're going to give him an extension.
Yeah.
Probably 2 years, I would think.
It'll be a 3 or 4 year deal
with 2 years guaranteed.
But probably the payout over 2 years.
Payout over 2 years.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated to see what they give him, because that will tell you a lot about what they think about the future of the position.
Right.
Let me ask you this, because they have the 6th pick in the draft. Mm-hmm. You have Geno Smith now. Let's say it is, like you said, a 3 or 4 year deal with 2 guaranteed, and it's kind of a 2 year deal with the money, and you have the 6th pick in the draft, and Shedeur Sanders slips to you. Do you still pick Shedeur Sanders as the future quarterback? I don't know. I like I said, I'm asking. I don't know the answer to that question.
And neither do I. And I'm going to say that because we just don't know. And this played out exactly how we were talking about with the quarterbacks, because the fact is we didn't know. We can't get into John Spytek and Pete Carroll and Tom Brady's head, and don't forget about Tom Brady. He's big with this. In order to understand, to get a full understanding, what do they think of Sam Darnold? What do they think of Aaron Rodgers? What do they think of Russell Wilson? I think we got our answer.
Yes.
And I think we got a foretelling of that answer when the Raiders made a major run at Matthew Stafford, the Rams quarterback, who was there for the taking for a minute or two. The Raiders pushed that as far as they could. He ultimately stayed with the Rams. But I think that chase told us or gave us an inkling of what the Raiders thought about the free agent crop of quarterbacks, which wasn't very much.
Right.
And so they turned their attention obviously to Geno. But to your point and to your question, I don't know what they think of Shedeur Sanders right now, or for that matter, this quarterback class in general. Now we'll get a better idea. Maybe the owners' meetings are coming up later on this month in Florida. It's generally when you can talk to the coach and the general manager. And by now, they've all done as deep a dive as they possibly can into this draft, and including the quarterbacks. They're not going to tell us what they actually or what they fully think. But I think we'll have a better idea maybe of where their head is as far as the quarterbacks. Because if they do like them, if they do like Shedeur Sanders, then nothing that has happened in the addition of Geno Smith should preclude them from taking Shedeur Sanders if that's their guy.
If that's your guy and you've fallen in love with him and he's there and you've watched the film and you've decided this is the person you want to be your future, then take him.
Right.
No question about that. You and I talked before. I kind of would make the argument, and I have, that I think the Raiders got the better part of the deal with Geno than the Seahawks did with Sam Darnold. They signed him for $105 million, $55 guaranteed.
Yeah.
I just think that they got the better end of that deal.
Yeah, I do too, and I think, and the reason I say that is there's a couple things that work in Sam's favor. He's 27 years old compared to 35.
True.
For Geno Smith. So that factor works in. He's coming off a fabulous year with the Minnesota Vikings. There's no question about that. But when you talk about Sam's 1 year compared to Geno's now 3 years,
Right.
solid 3 years back to back to back. I think there's a little bit more certainty with Geno Smith. Now, we could be looking down the road 4 years down the road and say they made a mistake.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold
was great with Seattle.
Yeah, he clearly was turning the corner last year with the Minnesota Vikings. That was who he was and was going to be. The Raiders missed out. But as in terms of safer pick right now, and
Right.
maybe just a better quarterback too in general, I think Geno Smith checks off that box. But that's for now, and I do believe beyond a shadow of a doubt, he certainly gives the Raiders a better chance to win games from the quarterback position compared to what they had on the roster.
We haven't also talked about the split between indoors and
Yeah,
outdoors.
right.
I was blown away by his indoor splits in terms of his production indoors. And as you said, there could be as many as 12 indoor games this year. Obviously, he's indoors at home all the time. That bodes well for them. I've never seen splits like that in terms of indoors and outdoors in guys.
No, neither have I. He plays really good indoors,
Really well.
and he
Yes,
plays good,
Really. Yeah.
good outdoors. It's not like he plays bad outdoors. It's just that he plays really well.
Really well inside.
Inside. So I don't now. You go up to Seattle. He's played in Seattle. He's played in New York, right? Basically, the Giants, mostly the Jets, a little bit of the Giants, and then with the LA Chargers. I don't think he even got on the field with the Chargers, and then in Seattle. Those are Seattle. Outdoors in Seattle at certain times of the year, and of course in New York, and we've been there when it's
Right,
been
absolutely.
both places, really, when it's been rainy, cold, windy, all that kind of stuff. So that plays into it maybe a little bit, but certainly here he's going to be in a controlled environment for the most part. And if they're getting that that end of or level of Geno Smith, wow,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, so the key. No quarterback's going to win games by himself. Obviously, the Raiders have massive holes all over their roster. Or significant holes all over their roster. And at least to begin free agency, those holes got bigger, it feels. They lose Trayvon Merrick. They lose Robert Spillane. They lose Nate Hobbs. And they lose Divine Diablo within the first, 24 hours,
24 hours
of free agency. And before we go any further with that, when was the last time the Raiders' defense lost four starters in the opening of free agency? Usually those are guys like nobody wants.
And it sort of tells you what the league thought of their defense, even though statistically, and they had a lot of injuries.
Yeah.
Statistically, it didn't live up to what you and I saw in Costa Mesa.
Right.
At training camp.
But
they had significant injuries, especially up front.
Mm-hmm.
But it does tend to show you what other people around the league thought about those players, because all those players went and got their money.
Yeah, more than we
paid.
probably were anticipating.
Yes.
And full disclosure, I texted Mike Mayock, the general manager in 2021, who drafted all the players that we just mentioned, including Malcolm Koonce, who the Raiders did bring back. I was like, not a bad draft, as it turns out. And he kind of laughed and said, kind of missed on that first round pick with Alex Leatherwood. But
yeah.
other than that, the 2021 draft was pretty darn good. So tip of the cap to Mike Mayock. There was some good that occurred here, obviously for him and the draft, and the last 24 hours or so certainly pointed to that. There were some good players in this draft. Now, the Raiders go and sign a Jeremy Chin to sort of be the replacement for Trayvon Merrick. Of all the losses that the Raiders had, I felt like the Merrick one was the biggest.
I did too.
The age, the position,
all that
the
they asked
production.
him to do.
Yeah, he was drafted by them. By the way, Robert Spillane wasn't drafted by them. He was signed by Dave Ziegler in the previous, or two general managers ago. Crazy. But I felt like Trayvon Merrick was the guy that they probably wanted the most to come back. Just got paid by.
He got paid by Carolina. Yeah, good for him. Good for his agent. I mean, good for whoever set that up. And you can't. Again, I've talked about this. I mean, one play away, that's the cliche.
Right.
It's a tough game. It's a violent game. When you are up to get paid, you go get paid.
Right, and they certainly did. So they bring in a linebacker from the Pittsburgh Steelers to be the replacement, at least initially, for Robert Spillane. I want to talk about Malcolm Koonce, bringing him back, 1-year deal, $12 million. He had
Prove-it deal.
Tricky market, still pretty good money. I think I felt like the consensus I was getting was 8 to 10 on a prove-it deal.
He got 12.
He got 12, so good for him. It shows you that the salary cap did go up by another $20 million or so, so that helps a little bit. But when you start looking now at the Raiders' defensive line, they also brought back Adam Butler on a new deal. So Pete Carroll and John Spike, the general manager, have been talking about building from the lines back. at least in free agency, when they took care of Max Crosby, they bring back Malcolm Koonce for at least one more year. They bring back Adam Butler for a couple of years. Christian Wilkins is going to come back.
Should be healthy.
Tyree Wilson's still in the mix. We'll see what happens with Clavon Chasen.
Right.
But all of a sudden, that defensive line that we did see every day
in Costa
Mesa is close to coming back. And if that is what they're going to get for the balance of the season, that certainly bodes well. And they were able to build some depth too because of those injuries with the Chasens and the couple other young players, Adam Butler in particular, stepping up. Now you look at that from top to bottom, and the depth feels pretty decent too.
Well, and what do we say? I mean, other than quarterback, those are the most important positions on the team, especially the edge rushers. It's going to be huge to get Crosby back. He got his extension. He got paid. Wilkins with him inside. Koonce, like you said, it's a prove-it deal. He was hurt last year, so now if he comes and proves it, and if he was the guy before we saw, then all of a sudden he's up for another big contract next year.
He can go ring that bell.
Go ring the bell.
Yeah. Now, and when you talk about what the Raiders have not done, this might also be a strategic. We see you, Malcolm.
Right.
And you're in line for a big season, which means a big payday next year. Maybe they're stashing away some salary cap space and some money to address that next year. Real quick, we're going to go to our own Heidi Fang and Chuck Esposito from Station Casinos STN Sports for their weekly segment this week. Take it away, Heidi and Chuck.
And joining us now on the First and 10 podcast, we have Chuck Esposito, the race and sportsbook director of Station Casinos. Get the STN app today. I'm Heidi Fang, and we're going to talk a little bit here about the wild period that has taken place here in the NFL free agency. Wild 24 hours, Chuck, and I wanted to get your take. Who are the biggest winners and who are the biggest losers so far, in your opinion?
It's definitely been a frenzy, Heidi. I mean, you look at teams like, I think the Commanders helped themselves a lot, trading for Deebo Samuel and then being able to add Tunsil, the offensive lineman. I think the Bears really improved their offensive line a lot. Also, the defense with the trenches, adding Jarrett there. And I think teams like the two teams in the NFC West, the 49ers and Seahawks, really hurt themselves. I mean, the Seahawks, they're starting skill position players from last year of Geno Smith and Lockett and DK Metcalf all gone. I know you bring in Sam Darnold. And the Niners, it seems like every time I look up, the Niners are either releasing someone or somebody is signing a player away from them. So I think both the Niners and Seahawks really took a step back. And I think the Rams, adding Devontae Adams, has really helped. And I think the Rams, for me, should be the favorite in the NFC West right now, ahead of both the Seahawks and 49ers. I think the Raiders, they did need a quarterback. They went out and got Geno Smith. They still need a lot of help in the skill position area. I'm not sure what they're going to do in the draft right now. I know there's been some chatter about Genty, but I think to draft a running back, knowing that shelf life isn't that long, you really need to have a good team or an ascending team. I think the Raiders have way too many holes. They've lost a number of guys on defense. I think they need to address that side of the ball or maybe wide receiver in the draft. But right now, it's just been crazy with the teams that have really kind of helped themselves and teams that have kind of gone the other way.
All right, Chuck, you mentioned the NFC West there. I wanted to get into the AFC West because there's been some movement there. A lot of people predicting that the Broncos have been the big winners early. Where do you see the numbers lining up for these teams in the AFC West? Obviously, Chiefs are probably still king based on the facts that they made it to the Super Bowl. But how does everything else line up in your eyes?
I'm not going to talk about the Chiefs. But, yeah, when you look at I think the Chargers first, they re-signed Khalil Mack. They added Najee Harris at running back. I still think they need a big play wide receiver. And I think as the market changed, if T. Higgins is dealt from the Bengals, I think the Chargers are a prime spot for him. I think if he ends up going there or another big-time wideout, I think it helps the Chargers a lot. And the Broncos, they had a good defense last year. They've gotten better with defense so far this year. I think they're going to be in with a Genty or a Hampton in the draft if they can get a running back. We know how well Bo Nix played last year. I think all three of those teams have kind of improved a bit. And I think you look at the Raiders right now, and I know Geno Smith, you've solidified the quarterback position, but for how long? I still think you have to address a quarterback at some point in the draft. I mean, if Shedeur Sanders starts to drop, is he a guy at 6? Do you trade back into the first round? Is maybe a Milroe or a Jackson Dart possible in the second round or late first? But the other three teams have really helped themselves right now. And the Raiders losing 3 starters on defense and still not addressing the skill position players, I think puts them behind the other 3 in the AFC West.
Chuck, thank you again so much for the time. Right now, I want to get our fans a chance to listen to Malcolm Koonce. The Raiders have re-signed the defensive end, and he is speaking with us today. So we're going to get over to Malcolm. But Chuck, thank you again so much for all of the great information. This is Chuck Esposito from Station Casinos, STN app. Make sure to download that today, wherever you get your apps from. And we'll be back with you next week. And for right now, everyone, we're going to tune in to Malcolm Koonce.
Where are you on your rehab, and how frustrating of a situation was last year getting hurt like you did and missing the season?
I'm in a good place for my rehab. Feel good. Trust the Raiders training staff over here, lifting staff. They've been putting me in a good place, in a good position. And it was extremely frustrating. It's like an overall feeling that you let people down, even though it's something that you couldn't help. But I'm happy that it's behind me, and I can only look forward. So.
I know it's early on, but what do you think you guys can accomplish this year if all you guys are healthy?
I think the sky's the limit for us. I think that all we got to do is just take it one step at a time, one game at a time, and that's it. Just be true to ourselves and play how we know we can play.
First and foremost, when you're going through the process of wanting to re-sign with the Raiders, how much of the decision to bring back Patrick Graham play in your decision to want to stay a Raider, and how's your initial conversations been with Pete Carroll as well?
Oh, it's a big part. I go, especially somebody like Pete Carroll. I go, he's a legend of a coach. So, like, who doesn't want to be around him? And then Pat, I go, he kind of see me kind of grow into the player that I am. So I'm very comfortable around him, comfortable in the system, and it's always great to be around guys that believe in you. So,
all right, so we're going to be heading out here in a second. Your final thoughts on the first day of free agency?
I think the Geno Smith was before free agency. That was a really good move. They have their quarterback now. They have their quarterback for at least a couple of years. We'll see what the contract is. I think it's wait and see defensively.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who do they replace these guys with?
Yeah.
They've signed a few guys. I understand that, but they're signing guys who might not have played to the level that the people they're replacing. So I think it's wait and see defensively. I like the Koonce coming back a lot, especially if he's healthy. I think their defensive line, like you said, could be really good, like we saw in training camp last year. And then we'll just have to wait on the back end.
Yeah, and there are some other players on the roster. One of the reasons why you draft is you draft for the potential to replace when guys leave in free agency.
We haven't even talked about that. They could draft guys one or two guys who could be starters.
Absolutely. I would expect that to be the case. But then also the guys that they have drafted just recently, DeCameron Richardson at cornerback, Thomas Harper at safety, Trey Taylor at safety,
Isaiah
Palamau, absolutely. Amari Burney, who is also a draft pick, Amari Gaynor, who is a undrafted free agent. These are guys that I think the Raiders believe have a chance to now be the replacements for the guys that just left the building. So the onus is on them now to take advantage of those opportunities. Yes. Absolutely. We're going to get out because there's a lot of work to be done. Enjoy your weekend, or you know what? We're going to leave room for an emergency podcast later this week.
You never know what's going to happen.
You never know
what's going to happen.
So let's be flexible on that. But if not, we'll talk to you guys next week. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you for your support. We look forward to talking to you next week.